So on today's agenda, we basically just will be covering, a very similar example of P3, uh, touching up on what we covered last recitation, and then basically just going into a little bit more of a structure format where we try to implement stuff similar to this, but instead of films, it's just another schema. So last rotation, we just created a quick example of CATS router so that we can implement all of our functions here. You would basically work in film.js and film.js in models to complete your assignment. And then I believe you would also work on, you would just implement basic, front-end testing that interact with your API, just like you did with P2. So with our example, we basically just covered a couple of ways of interacting with the database. I won't be covering installation of MongoDB, just like I didn't last week. If you want, you can follow the instructions in the README if you haven't already to just create an account in MongoDB Atlas, and then you'll be able to basically interact with your database, remotely instead of having it running on your local machine. And it's all for free, so. All right. So essentially, if we want to find all elements in a certain collection, we would just use the basic .find after we define our model in our models file. So here we basically create a couple of schemas, one for like the main star of the show, right, cat, and then each cat has an array of children, which we call kittens, and then we just create a schema for that as well. And then we put it in here to sort of tell Mongoose that this is the structure of our database. We also created some helper functions. I can go into this a bit later since we had to sort of rush through this. But if you want to find all elements, you can just do this. This would return an array of your, of the documents in your collection. And then one of the requirements of this assignment is you are not supposed to return the database given ID in your API responses. So just as a reference, each collection that you have in your database will have an ID that's auto-generated by the database, right? And you should definitely keep that. But we are working with cat ID, or I mean, in your case, film ID in your homework. And then each kitten also has their own specific ID that's provided by MongoDB, and then we also have to create one for them as well. So in this quick example, we basically just query all the documents in our collection and then map everything out to sort of exclude the database generated ID from our results. So that's what this line is for. So like for each cat in cats, we basically return just a singular object with all of the stuff that we need. Yep.
So there's two IDs.
And just speak up real quick because
two IDs, one given by the database and then one that we create.
Yeah. So the one that you create will be created in the front end, not in front end. Sorry, in the actual API itself. So that's what we did over here. Of course, you would have to find a way to generate this number dynamically, which I will cover as well. But in this example, we basically just pass an object where cat ID is 1, and that would create an object where cat ID is 1. So you basically have to figure out, okay, how do I get a number for cat ID that isn't conflicting with anything else? Because you don't want multiple cats with the same ID. So in the backend, you would handle that. And then whenever you get a post, you would, figure out what ID is available and then use that. Okay. So if you, and like building off of that, so if you want to create a cat, in this example, you can use the cat.create method. If you ever have any questions as to how you can interact with Mongoose, you can just go to our official website, and then everything regarding to like defining schemas or how you can query stuff, it's all over here with multiple examples as to how you can get this done. So this is just some assistance for you so that you can get a reference as to how you can use this if this recitation isn't 100% helpful. Anyway, so if you want to create a cat, we just call this function, and then date is also handled by the API itself, just like the ID is. And then in post, you are not allowed to accept a date parameter. So if I just go to README real quick. ID and date should be created server-side. So we'll cover that as well. We do this right over here. And then input, you should provide the capability of overwriting the date. So let's make this a bit more structured. Here we only have two routes just to sort of get like the core functionality out of the way. If you just give me a moment, then I can just do. And then one thing that's new in this assignment that you didn't necessarily see in P2 is the fact that we're starting to essentially nest certain routes. And in the context of we have slash films or slash cats, and then I got carried away. We have slash cats, and then we accept an ID, which is dynamic based on user input, and then we sort of nest into that and then try to access the kittens in this situation. So it works the same way as as your routes in P2, but just one thing to sort of look out for when you're building your format, when you're building your route templates in the definitions. So we have post, then we have get for reviews. Then we have put for reviews, and then that's how you update the review ID. So you got so here we have basically two parameters that can change based on what the user inputs. And then for our last route, almost, we basically want we want to provide functionality to delete a review. So I'll just keep this for myself so that I don't forget about it. But anyway, let's focus on this one at the moment. So we want to basically provide functionality to give the user the ability to essentially return all films or access all films that have a certain keyword in them. So we do that with like the root route that we have over here. So with like this main one, we can do essentially in our try catch statement access the search query. So let's get this done. Right, just like in P2, if search isn't defined, then that means you're not looking for anything specific. You just want to return all of your results. Right, but if you are looking for something, then we can go ahead and sort of perform a text query. So this is what we covered in last week's recitation, where we create a helper query function over here. So in your schema, you have your initial sort of type definition, right, where you declare all of the fields and their types. But you also have a second parameter over here in which you can define other options. So if you want to learn more about what you can put in here, you can always look at the documentation. My thing's a mess, so let's see. We can just go here maybe. And then you can basically see a bunch of examples of how it's being used to, so that's with query, and then you can do the same thing with schemas. So for example, we have, well, these are the type definitions. And then if I look somewhere here, then you can essentially see, for example, stuff like this. Okay. So with this, we have our query option where we just define any method that helps us find the results that we're looking for. So in this case, it's search cat. Here we essentially only look for all results in which the cat's name includes a certain set of characters. So that's what we did over here. In your assignment, you also have I believe, body field in film, and you would have to include that as well. So you would basically just add another object in this array. So you have return this dot where, and then the only parameter in this function is an object, and then this is basically a keyword that Mongoose uses to define certain approaches to sending queries. So we do basically $ or, and then everything like if then we pass an array as the value to that, and then if anything in that array gets matched, then that item gets included in the list of returned results. So if you would have title and body, then you just put title and body, right? And then we basically created a new regular expression object where we're looking for the pattern that we provide through the user. Okay, and there are multiple ways of going around this, but this is like the most straightforward one. And then we pass a flag into that, which basically stands for I, which like is the option of including anything. Okay. So with this, we return all results where the title or the body in your film example includes a certain text in the body of your name. So does that make sense? So with this, we define it. Okay. And then we can access that element or access that function like moving forward in our model. So this is the example that we covered last week. This goes into here, and essentially we can do something like this, where search is pulled out from our query, and then we defined our helper function, and then we pass that into it, and then docs basically returns an array of everything that matches that request that we sent. So after that, we do what we did previously, where we basically take our array, map the ID out from the cat, but also once we, I don't have Postman open. But essentially kittens also has an ID, so we can actually take care of that right now. Okay, so what I did here is essentially mapped each cat to include all elements except for the database generated ID, and then I did the same for kittens in our nested field. So that's what we have going on over here. Can everyone see this okay? Okay. All right, so that's what we have here. So with post, we want to do two things. So first we want to create the cat, but before we do that, we want to figure out what ID to assign it. So with that, you can take multiple approaches to how you want to do this, right? But I'm just going to go over one of them. And that approach would essentially be whenever the server starts up, you basically send a query to the database basically saying, give me the element with the largest ID in the database. Okay, so if you have 5 cats, ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it would return cat number 5 because it has the largest ID. So with that, you find out what the largest ID is, and if you know that, then you know that there are no IDs that are greater than that. Okay, so basically anything after that is free game to use when creating your objects. So if you want to learn more about that, I'll go over the example real quick, but basically you can just go to Stack Overflow. It's the first result that comes out. And then you have an example that looks like this. This is a little bit outdated because callbacks are no longer supported in Mongoose, like with this function that's being called. And this is part of the larger initiative of transitioning to promises. So this is what we talked about in the promises lecture. Basically, like callbacks and promises aim to provide the same functionality, but we had callbacks up until I think like 2015 or something, and then we're slowly moving to like the new standard of promise-based asynchronous programming. So with that, we have this quick example. What I can do is we essentially want to define a method where it's like essentially with a couple lines of code, we query the cat with the largest ID, right? We execute it. That gets put into our object, and then we can access the cat ID of that object, and then just add one to it, and then that'll be our available ID. So whenever you create something, then you can just do something like that looks like this, right? Where you just pass the available ID, and then you got to make sure that you increment it afterwards. All right, or just plus plus. So with post, we create the ID on the server side, which we just did, and then we also handle date, which we're doing right here. We basically just create a new date object that is like whenever you do that, the most recent time gets put into that. So if we look at our database real quick, you'll see that the cats that we created last week have the date of 10:30 T22. So that was October. Okay. So that's what we do over here. And then if I look at the README, you should definitely do some schema checking. So I'm not going to cover that in this recitation because we literally did exactly that in P2. If you want the answer for P2 was recorded in the last recording, you can just look at how the schema was verified and go from there. But you definitely should verify the body, and then if there's a violation, then you would have to, instead of sending 404, you would send 400. Okay, because 404 usually means not found, and then as you go further into HTTP codes, you'll essentially see that each one has their specific purpose. So 400 essentially means bad request, which means that you are sending it in a way that it shouldn't be sent, which means something's missing from your body, or you're sending too much or too little. Whereas 404 means not found. Okay. So we have this. I basically hard coded the body into this, but as with P2, you can just do right. You can just do request.body, making sure that you have application.json in your headers or application/json, because otherwise this won't work. But once you have that, you'll basically, after all the schema verification, you'll be able to create the cat, and then it'll, follow all of the guidelines of the assignment. So moving on from that, does anyone have any questions for posting cats or films? Yeah. Are you looking for an explanation? Oh, right. So, yeah, I define the function, but then you would just actually call it, right, on startup. So you run this, these two lines of code run, and then they overwrite available ID with the most recent available one. Does that answer your question?
I'm still a little bit confused about the date and the ID not being, it's only server side.
Yep.
So does that mean that in our code we still, I don't know where we can return it.
So the only thing that you should worry about not returning is the database generated ID, which looks like the underscore ID that we have over here, essentially, like this one. You have object ID.
And everything else we return.
Everything else you should return.
The date as well.
Yes. So you return the response, which includes the ID that you created and the date that you created. That is returning a response. What the assignment means by server side is basically it is created server side. So in your backend code, which is in my case cat.js, in your case it's film.js with lowercase f, you would create the ID and the date, and then you would push that to the database essentially. Okay, but with all the GET requests, you return all those values except for underscore ID, which you actually don't create in your code because it's automatically handled by the database.
Sorry, what are you sending with the GET request?
What am I sending with the get
Yeah,
request?
the response. Or like,
The desired output. So for getting cats, for example, you would return an array of cat objects minus the database generated ID,
okay,
which is
so
what we did here with the mapping.
you know,
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, the filter elements. So if it's search, well, I mean not so filter. So if search is missing from the query, then you would return all elements. Okay. If you have a search query in your URL, then you would return the filtered stuff. There's also a get request, which we'll be doing next, which is like you're getting a specific object with a specific ID, right? That is literally like the same thing as this, except we're just returning one object. So we can do cat.find1, and then just pass our ID into um, all right, so this is one of our parameters. We would isolate cat ID from that, and then just include it here. So this .find1 is part of the mongoose documentation. You can also, just as you would any other method that's associated with this, you can look it up on the website. But find1 is essentially a method that accepts a bunch of parameters, but you just need to send it one, where it's like I'm looking for an object where the cat ID is equal to a specific number. Okay, so that would return essentially, like the cat that you're looking for. So does this make sense? So we essentially query the singular cat that we're looking for, right? And then if we find it, then we basically clean it. And you should definitely do some like error checking where it's like, if no found cat, like then return status 400 or like 404 or whatever the time is asking of you. But just to save time, I'm basically just assuming that the query actually returns something, and then I'm cleaning the cat. Whoa. Right, basically just removing the database generated ID from the object, and then same thing with the kids. So I can do that, and then I can just do rest.json clean cat. Does that make sense? Okay. So with put, you want to edit a specific cat. So we can just do the same thing that we did with our initial, like querying a single cat. So we do that, and then let's see. So we update it by film ID. If it doesn't exist, then we should create it, and then we should also add support for including dates in the request body. So essentially, if you send a date in the body, then the API will take that and overwrite the current date in the database with like the date that you put in the body. So with this, we can basically do a bunch of things. We're not editing the ID of the cat. Okay, so we're editing the name, the date, and that's pretty much it. I mean, in our situation. So in film, you would do title, body, date. I believe that's everything. But if you want to edit the reviews, that would be another route. So we can worry about that a bit later. So we can just do name and date equals to request.body. And then if we don't find our cat, then we can go ahead and create a cat, which I'll worry about a bit later. So we'll do that later. But if there's a cat, then we want to basically edit it and then send it back to the database and then return the updated result. So we can do okay, so we find our cat. If it's there, then we update the name and date, right? If they're included in the body, we save it, and then we clean the result by removing the database generated IDs, and then we return that result. Okay. If it doesn't exist, then we want to create the cat. And the way we do that is with the same mechanism as our post request. So we can just do something like this. Right, where we essentially, hold on. Right, we do await cat create, and then put our stuff in it. This would be pulled from your rec.body, and again, you would do some schema verification just like you did in P2. Right, I won't be doing it here, but like definitely verify schema. So I'm just gonna put a comment in this real quick. Jesus. All right. So we have this. Does anyone have any questions for put? Okay. All right, for delete, this is very straightforward. If you don't know how to do it, you can literally just look it up. Let's say I don't know how to do it. I would just go to W3 or Geeks for Geeks, for example, or any, like Stack Overflow, and essentially just do that somewhere over here where it's like you want to delete one where the cat ID right, where the cat ID equals to our thing. And then if there's an error, then basically like, you should return 404 if it doesn't exist. So something like this. Then you would just do for example. It would be best if you return all the cats. Hopefully, it's not that big of a deal. I wouldn't stress about it too much about what you return in the response. As long as you follow the guidelines mentioned in the README, should be fine. So does anyone have any questions with delete? All right. With post, we want to create a kitten that is part of the child of cat. So we first want to find our cat. And then what we can do is once we find our cat, we can essentially push the kitten into it. So again, you should right, you definitely should verify that just like you did with P2, like the structure of the body of the kitten that you want to create or review. And then what you can do is, well, first you want to find the maximum ID of the kittens. So just like we did with cats, right? Instead of essentially querying the database for this, because we already have our film or cat object with the kittens inside of it, or no kittens at all, we can essentially try to find the maximum ID of those kittens. So if I do this real quick, right, with this line of code, looks a little bit confusing, but it's basically just for each kitten, right? Our max ID, or initially our max ID is set to 0 for kittens, and then for each one, we essentially check if the kitten's ID is greater than our current maximum, and then if it is, then we set that to the maximum. Otherwise, we just keep it the same. Okay, so by the end of this line of code, the maximum kitten ID will be the largest ID that you have in kittens. So you can do found cat.kittens.push, and then of course you would have the name, date, what else? And then kitten ID, which is an input parameter. So you do something like this, and then you would basically push a new object into it. So let me just confirm this real quick. Yep. All right. Right, so we take our maximum ID, add 1 to it, and then that'll be our new kitten ID of the object that we create. And then we push name and date into it. Okay. And then we also have to not forget to do found cat.save. Right. So this is what we did with our initial example last week, I think. Actually, yeah, we did. So like right over here, essentially just push it to the array just like we did with regular JavaScript, and then we save it. Okay, so that updates the result in the database. And then I'm not running any of this at the moment, but if you look at the results that we had from last week, then we were able to sort of create this object by running the code. So moving back to Postkins, and we have 14 minutes left. So let's see, we did this, and press send. Yeah. All right, does that make sense? So that's how you update stuff. Kittens, at least. Or, create a kitten. So with get, it's the same thing with getting a regular cat. So we have our initial one. Let's see. So this is our code from getting a specific cat by ID. So most of this remains the same, but instead of cleaning the cat, we only care about the kittens. So all right, so we take our kittens, map it, remove the database generated ID, and then return that in your response. Does that make sense? All right. With put, it's very similar to what we did here. But first we want to isolate isolate our parameters. So like I think this is the first time we have two parameters that we have to specify. So one for cat ID, one for kitten ID, right? So we take both. Try to find a cat. If there is no cat, then we want to, in this case, return A404. Otherwise, we want to find a kitten. If there is no found kitten, then we want to do the same thing we did with posting a kitten, so creating one, and then so we essentially create a max kitten ID, find the maximum ID by doing this, and then once we have that, we just push um, our thing. And then with post, we again, just like with cat, we actually handle the date on the server side. So you do this when you create a kitten. But if you're editing one, then you definitely do want to provide compatibility with that. So if I just remove this real quick, and then we also want to make sure that we save it. So that's if we don't find a kitten, right? So we want to create one and then we save it. If there is a found kitten, then you can just go ahead and verify the schema. So actually, you don't have to verify the schema, but if you're putting stuff. Long story short, we have const name and date equals to request.body. And then with that, we essentially can modify our Okay, so this is another way of doing what I did previously, where it's if name then set it, if date then set it. Okay. In this scenario, I just if name is undefined, then it'll automatically just default to what it currently is. Otherwise, it'll overwrite the result. So with that, we make sure that we save it, we clean the cat, and then we return the response. Does that make sense? And then with delete, it's the same thing. Well, not really, but we want to find our cat. So that's what we do over here. If there is no cat, then we return 404. Then we try to find the kitten. And then if there is no kitten, then you return it 404 as well. But if there is a kitten that you find that you want to delete, then you can just you can just do find index and then or okay, so the index, if the index is -1, that means that there is no cat that was found or no kitten that was found in the array. All right, which means you return 404. If there is an index, then you can just do the regular splice method that we did in P2. So we can just do found cat dot found. Actually, we can just do found kitten. Found kitten dot splice found. Oh, never mind. Okay, so we can just do found cat dot kittens and then splice kitten index, and then we remove one element. So the splice function basically removes elements from an array. So that's what we do over here. We splice by the index and then we remove one element. So with that, that removes the kitten from the array, and then we can just do await found cat dot save, and then you can return any response that you want. It's not that big of a deal. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions? That's pretty much it for P3. You also have to do main.js in the front end. It's literally the same thing as you did in P2. So
For the buttons in the Node.js, this usually does. It's saying that you should be able to update the reviews as well as you have to update do you have to be able to update the reviews and the film using one button or just one or the other?
One or the other. When you do your video, though, use Postman. Okay. Because that way the graders will see that you like it actually works with like extensive testing. The front end is just getting you familiar with manipulating stuff on the front end to send requests to the back end.
Could it be possible? Sometimes it's hard to follow the video, but like the like file you were working on to like share a copy of that on it.
I'll see what I can do. I'll try. All right. Well, if that's the case, then recitation's over. Office hours on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. If you're taking late days, then you can show up, and I can help you. If you ran out of late days, then you can still submit late. It'll just be -10 per day.
You're
Okay.
okay. Office hours tomorrow?
Tomorrow and Wednesday.
Okay.
All right.